Hey, Highway, welcome. Hex is the way. I believe you might be the only speaker this evening because Trap. Let's see. Gravity said that he's not going to make it, and I usually expect Kef to show up in this area of time.
He said he was going to be late. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said he's coming. He'll just be a little late.
Okay. Well, I've got the YouTube live stream going. And then thanks for hopping out of that other space and joining me over here. It's been a wonderful day in Texas. Earlier, I did a live stream, and I touched on the fact that in the last week, I had a very large stake become due. And I had huge pressures upon my, my psyche of getting everything positioned correctly. It was just as challenging, in my opinion, as a sacrifice. Like the days of the pulse chain sacrifice, arranging so much money and trying to figure out where I wanted to place it all. Hex has been an absolute blessing for me. I have been taking full advantage of staking out for long time periods. And then as everybody comes in on the action, then the pie grows and my share gets larger. It's wonderful. So how late do you think he's going to be?
Yeah, let me check his message here.
I witnessed something pretty funny today. Every Tuesday evening, I will pay attention to or attend a Bitcoin meetup. And because of COVID, they started doing virtual meetups, and they hadn't yet gone back to in-person meetups until today. And their idea was to meet at a co-working space or a hacker space for Bitcoiners on 6th Street in downtown Austin. And the organizer of the Bitcoin meetup, he walked into that place, and once he gave them his name and they Googled him, then they kicked him out because he wasn't maximalist enough. I thought that was funny. No conversation, nothing like that after I find out that you're not a maxi. So supposedly they used to meet years before at a place a few blocks away, so they just went over there as a backup place. So I'm glad I didn't go, because it may not have been safe for me walking in there. Like, what should I was thinking about, like, if I go, what would I wear? Would I wear any hex stuff? Would I show my hex support? And then that happened. Maybe that's the reason why I thought about it. Hey, Hex is the way. On the screen on YouTube, it's got your background image of the decreasing supply of T-shares.
Oh, great. Yeah. So, yeah, I shared this space out. I just message, Pep, see if he's coming. In the meantime, yeah, I can talk for a while too. That's a lot of people look at Hex and they look at the chart of Hex and they compare it with other cryptocurrencies based on their charts. But with Hex, it is a multifaceted system, right? So we have not just one chart to look at, we have T-share charts as well, right? The value of a T-share has increased over time, and it's unlike even the Hex chart, right? It's actually superior. So if you were holding a T-share, you're gaining value faster potentially than Hex itself, which Hex did rather wonderfully for most people just holding. So that's one thing that I think is a little disingenuous or unfair when you're comparing cryptocurrencies is looking just solely at a Hex chart, so that's one thing. There's T-share chart, there's T-share chart of supply, but there's also yield that basically is on the chart. People are accumulating more Hex through the yield, and to have yield come out to these people who are mining Hex and also having a chart that's going up is something rather remarkable. Like, for example, there's certain coins out there that start out with a fixed supply. Let's just say they have 500 million coins. Their chart is simply just showing their lifespan with 500 million coins. And maybe some people lose their wallets, right? But overall, it would just stay that way. But with Hex, we have a burning and then we have an inflating of the supply. So supply gets destroyed and it gets created or minted. And so I call it a dynamic supply, which a lot of websites have a hard time understanding or forecasting. They like things really simple, just like a fixed supply, which is interesting to me because Bitcoin is not a fixed supply. It actually increases every 10 minutes, right? Every 10 minutes, 6.25 Bitcoins created, which is inflation at about 1.5, 1.8% per year. Next year, it'll go down half. So usually this is signifying the bull market's coming based on the fact that there's sell pressure on Bitcoin. However, next, we have our own ecosystem, right? We're not tied to that happening like Bitcoin whatsoever. So our cycle could be based on several things. I think the initial cycle of X had to do with getting inflation out there, right? So you had the gifting free Hex to Bitcoiners first, and then you had the transform Ethereum into Hex at a massive rate per day, right? We had hundreds of millions of it coming on market daily, which seems today astronomical, right? When you think about today's terms, if we see somebody selling 100 million Hex, we're like, oh my goodness, a lot of Hex. And potentially if they sold all at once, the price of Hex would go down a lot. But yeah, initially getting the inflation out there, getting the supply out there was part of the project's goal, right? So we're it's more like a 2020 thing, and then through 2021, 2022, we're starting to see us, I call it digesting inflation, which is essentially we're right-sizing our community to the supply of coins, and we're participating in what EcoBuilder said, which is the people who are trading are eventually cutting themselves short and cutting themselves short in the system or the cycle of hex, which to me, I term the cycle of hex as 15 years. The first 15 years would be a one cycle in hex. And it's a cycle based on the T-shares and the ability of a person to do a 5555 or a 15.2 year cycle or term, as I call them, terms in hex. So you serve out a full term or a full cycle, that's 15.2 years. And that's something that initially, it wasn't something a lot of people could even comprehend doing. But first is, you had to have basically the trial run of hex itself. Let's see if this thing exists. Let's see if it's not a rug pull, if it's not a scam or whatever. And after you get through that phase, which, a year, 2 years, usually usually within 1 year, you can kind of see a lot of these things get faded out and, the value and the liquidity pools get removed or drained. It could only take a month or two. So, yeah, you're talking hex on 3.3, 3.4 years now. And so that's unquestionable at this point. But getting back to what we were describing, so that system creates a different type of chart, which the chart of T-share supply, you could look at it as what exists, what will exist, and what could exist. What has existed would be whoever participated in burning their hex would be T-shares the next contract. And that's a measurement tool that allows you to be weighted in the system based on the amount of time you put in, the amount of hex you put in, and your strength in that system is also based on how many other participants are in there as well. If you were the only one, you would get all the inflation, for example. But it's dynamic; it changes every single day, and so it's a fun thing. A lot of us are looking at that, and we started to realize the massive potential for basically a deflation in the T-shares over time, because as the math works, the ROI of somebody who ends their staking term, that ROI is going to raise the price for if they are entering back into the hex contract again, burning their hex and creating another hex term. And so what that does is it gives us, in the longer, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, you start to really see a nice, beautiful chart of the T shares, which is a trillion shares in the hex contract, are going to continuously cost more. We just had a bump this week of about 110 hex. So if you want a T-share, you're going to have to pay 110 more hex for 1 day. If you want to go out, 10 to 15 years, you're probably going to pay another 35 to 40 hex than you used to have to pay. And that was just, I believe, in 1 day this week. There was we call them big payday stakes. Those are the ones with the highest ROI based on the bonus that they received on big payday. So those really affect the T-share rate. They affect it more than, billions of hex stake nowadays, because they have the highest earnings. And that's basically what increases the fastest rate. We have another one in August for about 500 hex. So we look at these type of things and we see, we're not just looking at hex and the hex price, but we're looking at how, if you're a participant and a believer in the hex contract and the community, you're looking at, if you're an accumulator, where do you want to accumulate in order to get the best potential in this cycle of hex? And that would be, you look at some of these events, like before August, if I was to set up some longer stakes and I wanted to basically get the most shares possible, I would want to do it before August, because otherwise I'll be paying more for those shares, right? So if I already have the hex, I might as well, start those hex terms before some of these big payday early hex stakes come out. So that's what we're looking at. The T-share rate over time tends to go down. It can go up and down. However, as it continues to cost more, and basically as we have participants who are highly involved already, right? Like 70% of the hex out there is for the most part already burned and in the hex contract, besides the one that's being held in like the Pulse X sacrifice wallet. So that means even if everybody took their liquid hex right now, and if they burn their hex, what are you going to get? You're not going to get too many more T-shares. If you look at the liquidity pool, you can't even create a shark right now. You could create maybe like, you're looking at, less than a shark. So that means you can barely create like maybe 4,000 T-shares right now if you bought all the hex on the market. So what does that tell you? It tells you that the yield that's out there for you is very hard to obtain by other large players coming into the system, which to me is a very good thing, because it's hard to have a bad actor come in and manipulate the contract or manipulate by selling tons of hex against us. And another key point to touch on would be the fact that there is not a lot of minting coming out daily. We see that if you use Hex Daily Stats, there's a section where it shows the Hex mint, basically what's being minted on a day. And that column or that section is actually talking about yield and principal together minted, right? So it's a little bit confusing, I would say, because the hex was burned, so technically it already existed, so we counted it as existing. So the new 3.69 inflation, a portion of that comes out with whatever was created. It's very last year it was the Bitcoin inflation. It was literally, X pays out 3.69% in a year, but 2% of that 3.69 was actually pushed out well into the future, 5 years, 10 years, average 7 years right now, which is pretty huge. I remember when it was average was only 5 something years. So we're definitely preferring to be in the system longer as a community, which means more community trust in the fact that Hex is going to be around. We're going to continue to use it as a alternate system for us to store wealth. So that's what I'm looking forward to on that chart. And we don't have a set exact time, but most likely April, maybe next week or the week after, we may very well see. It could even happen this week. We might actually see sub 10 million T-shares. This is going to happen probably in April. It might pop back up a little bit. Like I said, it can go up and down, but eventually we trend downward, and we're expecting sub 10 million, which means 9,950,000 T-shares. So what does that do? Eventually, what it does is it means if you still have the same number of shares in the system, and the Hex is paying out the same amount, but there's less total shares, that means that your portion is actually increased, right? So potentially we're going to be hitting up into that 6.5 average, 6.6 average. And yeah, we used to be 2, right? 2x, 3x, 4x. So we're seeing it's a patient, delayed gratification ideal that we're trying to promulgate in the blockchain. And not everybody can handle that. Most people in society are brainwashed they literally will go into a gas station and eat there because it's faster, even though they'll pay 10 times as much for their food, right? They will still go there, order fast food because they want the instant gratification. Our whole society's trained that way. So we are going against the grain to some extent, but that's how you're able to train yourself to have good financial habits that can basically gear you up to success for the long term. And I think it's hard because people don't want to pay the time in order to be successful in Hex. And what will happen is they'll probably chase a whole bunch of other things, and they'll probably get a lot worse results over time, it's unfortunate, but that's generally what happens in crypto, right? You're spinning around in a circle, trying to touch as many things as possible, and the influencers are telling you, okay, stop here, but you got so dizzy spinning around trying to point at all these different objects that you get lost, and it's unfortunate, really, right? But to be honest, that's fine. I like to say, there's unlimited amounts of money in the world, and there's more and more of it being created daily that can chase after good assets, digital assets that are blockchain technology that are able to grant you some store of value better than the dollars that are being created, or the paper currency, whatever country you're in. So that's the first part of what I want to talk about. Did you have any input on that so far, Eco Builder?
No, sir, but I do love recognizing when it goes sub 10 million shares, how an even larger amount of inflation flows into the system, because it's 3.69% inflation per year. So as the whole system grows, that 3.69 gets bigger, and then we're shrinking the shares in the meantime. So hold on to those shares.
Yeah, and I liked how you talked about how you had a dilemma, basically almost like a sacrifice phase, because you are sacrificing your today, your monetary value of cashing out today. You're basically sacrificing that instant gratification of what you could get right now with your HEX.
I had a huge stake that came out, and I basically was sitting there looking at those funds almost like it was just as important as Pulse Chain Sacrifice, moving those funds around, getting them in the right place. Keep going.
And it potentially was more important, right? We'll see. But that's I guess that's how we put an importance on security, because what once was something small could be something a lot larger once it's ended. So just a little side note, we saw some people getting liquidated, a lot of security issues in crypto recently. Not necessarily Hex community, but just it is good to spread out your basically spread out your crypto between multiple wallets. At least that should help a little bit. But I wanted to speak on the other portion, which is basically, what can I say this? This is something that we limit ourselves. We don't see, I don't know if I'm going to have to drive somewhere. So, seeing if somebody's coming near me here. I'm just parked. But so we see ourselves and what we potentially can do, and our ability in the Hex ecosystem is based on shares. And so what I wanted to lead further on that is, it's like something on a golf cart. So I don't know if that's a little security person. All right. Well, let me move along just a little bit on my merry way. Some little security golf cart is like, hey, what is this guy doing sitting here? Good times. But basically, we limit ourselves based on our imagination, right? So we can only comprehend certain things that are us, or what we're going to achieve. And you could apply this to almost anything, whether it's a job, or whether it's how much money you're going to have, or relationships. And if we apply this to Hex, and to our leagues, our staker leagues, right? We have different ones break out depending on how much you're holding in shares. So the crowd right now, we just mentioned 10 million. So that 10 million is important, because it used to be 11.4 or 11.1. That meant that if you wanted to be in the league of the crowds, you would have 1.14 T-shares, right? And then you're able to be in that league. if you wanted to be into if you want to be into turtles, you're going to have to be 11 point, 11 point something. So now going down to the 10, what's happening is, in order to enter those leagues, it's actually getting cheaper, right? You're actually having less T-shares for those. And also, if you look at squids, so let's do it by the 10 million. So 10 million means basically 100. We're getting to the point where it's going to be sub 100 T-shares in order to be the squid. And then dolphin would be 1,000 or even sub 1,000. We might get to the point where it's, less and less over time. And then, sharks goes up into the 10,000 range. So what I wanted to talk about was, when I first started out in Hex, you look at this and you see all these different wallets and you see how much Hex people are using. And, it can be a little daunting if you don't understand the system. But I tried to step away from what everybody else was doing. And I tried to look at, setting some personal goals for myself and seeing like, well, how far do I want to go with this? Of course, not putting too much money based on what you could afford to lose, right? Like cryptocurrency is a high risk asset. But I do see in the community a little bit of a weakness right now anyways, where some people, they're kind of stuck in their kind of like, it's almost like being stuck in a rut, right? Where you're like, well, I'm kind of comfortable here. This is what I've achieved, and we'll see where it goes. And what I would say is, you should probably be looking at, and this is not advice of what you should do, but for me personally, what I'm thinking of is, how can I get 10x higher than what I'm at right now, right? And this is what I did when I was the lowest point in the leagues. Okay, well, let me figure out how to do this correctly so I could arrange my shares in the system that'll last longer, that I can get more of them, and let me go 10x further. And then I do it again, and then I do it again, right? And so, and basically, our limiting factor is our belief, our believe in ourselves, what we can achieve, or how much finances we can possibly earn, and what basically belief in the Hex contract and the system, the community supporting it. And I would say that even there's some people who feel like things are unattainable, and I don't believe that's true whatsoever, because Hex is really in the infant stage. So if you don't think you can go from one to the next, like let's give example of, there's a couple people I could see right now where it's like the squid level right now, we just did the numbers, right? 100. So 100 equals at Hex 6.7 cents. That would be 106.7 cents. It's, to get that 100, it's going to cost you about 900,000 Hex on a long share, right? 900,000 Hex, multiply that by 6.7 cents, you're looking at $60-something thousand. That's not impossible in cryptocurrency. And it might seem daunting. It might seem like a crazy amount. However, we have, most of us, time to participate in multiple bull and bear cycles. So it is very doable. Then you could go to the next level, right, where you're like, okay, most of these people who are in the squid levels, maybe they got their 100 T-shirts and they struggle and they pushed for it. They don't believe they could possibly go to the next level, like become a dolphin, become a shark. They don't think that's humanly possible. But we're having a situation with Pulse Chain launching where it could very well be very attainable. For example, if something like Pulse Chain, if you have some of that, maybe it goes up 10x or 100x faster than Hex. That gives you the ability to step back down some of your gains and then push them into the store of value. And then all of a sudden, something like $600,000 that you could have never just taken out of your personal finances and put into Hex, potentially that could be possible if Pulse Chain does 100x, 1000x, or 10,000x, right? And so what was the limiting factor? Again, it was you, basically, your belief in the system, whether it's dollar cost averaging into Hex and through the bear market, which to me personally, I was able to accumulate 600% more hex. Some people were crying and, complaining about the price or whatever else. But if you have a goal, well, I changed my goal. I said, you know what? I never thought this was going to be possible, but lo and behold, it is. I'm going to set a new attainment level, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but here's what I'll do. I'll do it every single week, and slowly but surely, some large attainment becomes possible, right? So and wouldn't it be great if we had some dolphin believe in hex enough to become the shark and have good shark, right? Have a good one instead of the ones that are a little bit aggressive, or maybe they're hurting the price too much when in fact they could be building up the LP and strengthening it. So yeah, I like this concept. I term it like your imagination, right? Have a larger imagination. You might wake up one day in crypto and it's just, you get shocked that the value has gone up so much. And it's good to prepare for that in advance. I think if we as the good actors come in and play that part, we can also protect the price as it reaches some of these bear market times in a better way. So that's what I've been thinking about. I don't want people to think, where they can and can't be in the system, because we're still so early. T-share costing 27,000 hex. Okay, well, when it's 500,000 hex or when it's 800,000 hex, you'll look back and you'll say, wow, 27,000 was very close to 10,000 when hex started. Right? So those are, it's a perspective. It's going to happen. It's built into the code. It's going to happen. So lock in what you can and just make some ways to just, accumulate here and there the DCA way, and you'll probably be able to attain a level you never thought possible. That's what I personally believe. It's worked really well for several people who are disciplined and have done it. So I wouldn't count it out. And on the last note, I would say I wouldn't count Richard Hart out. This is the one that I don't really see. It seems almost like we are trading based on pulse chain. We're giving like almost a negative to Richard Hart being in this system, and actually he is a massive positive. And so what we're going to see in the future is that basically is going to flip around, and you're going to see like, wow, of all the founders, this is the one I wanted to be, basically using his assets that he created, because he was the one that put in the most effort, the most time, the most care to try to protect us while all the other systems out there were collapsing. And it's undervalued now, but I think it will be put at a premium in the future. And I think those who will be rewarded with that premium are the people who showed the loyalty in the times that were a little bit less certain. And that's another definition of being early, essentially. When it's tried and true and everybody believes in it, like you could say something like Ethereum now or Bitcoin, where it's like, okay, everybody knows it's good, it's been around, it's unquestionable. How much more gains do you have at that point? But Hex, if you feel like, oh, wow, the chart's bloody, it's red, okay, some people are losing faith, okay, this and that, that's like, oh, wow, this is a great feeling. This is where you're still early enough to get those 10 to 100 to 1,000 X's, whereas in those other places you probably aren't. And that's, of course, if you have an asset that's in a growth moment, right? Like you're still in grow mode. You've got you have basically good statistics of your rates of users, and we're seeing that. We're seeing it really well. So I'm pretty excited. The last news that we could point to here was Richard Hart started the V4 in the testnet. Hex is like $5 on V3 on the V3 testnet, and you're going to get a lot of value just out of the fact that creating all these pairs of coins, and then people can move those into X or into Pulse or into PulseX. whether they're valuable or not. The ratio changes the LP, which creates the price. And that's what we can look forward to coming up. Is you're going to see the ability for us not to pay $50 or $400 to use Hex. That's going to take us to the next level where everybody can use it all the time. And to me, that's really, really bullish for Hex. It's just we're being patient. We're delaying our gratification. You can participate in the meantime and prepare, which gives you more opportunity before, because you're going to have a fork, you're going to double your coins. And that's the world's largest airdrop. So when he says that predominantly applies to Hex, right? The most valuable on the Ethereum blockchain, Hex, is going to be the thing that gets you the largest airdrop with the most value, most likely, right? And that, we've even surpassed USDC on our market caps. So when you say world's largest airdrop, that's what we're starting to talk about. It definitely hasn't ever achieved this level, and we're really close to the point where maybe some of the naysayers are going to back off when they see it all comes to fruition. In the meantime, those who were DCAing when we get some of these tips and all the fear and all the FUDs going out there, those are the people who get that high potential gains coming up in the 2024s and 2025s. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Expand it. Grant Cardone, he says 10x. That's kind of what I'm emphasizing with the staker leagues, right? Like if you could 10x your league, you're bumping into the next league. Maybe if you're halfway through, you only need to 5x your stack. But if you got 1 million Hex, do you really believe you can't get to 10 million Hex? The system is generating free Hex, and all you got to do is use it. All you got to do is burn your Hex, log it up for time, and you're going to gain more. So that to me tells me that I can personally accomplish a whole lot more with the Hex contract as my ally than if I'm just to use my own personal funds myself, right? So that's pretty much what I had to say for tonight. Another great week to be Mexican, and with that, I'll turn it back over to Eco Builder. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for the 30-minute talk. Great insights, all sorts of awesome points there. How about you just sign us off and we'll call it a night?
Yep, so this has been Hex News, just the tip. Hexicans at the best, maybe starting into the bull market here. We're getting close, so we're really interested in supporting Hex and Hex.com. Basically, you can share with your friends, share with your neighbors and your family. And I think with that, we're in an environment with a financial world right now where people really need the product that we have. So CD and certificates of deposit are becoming popular again, thanks to the massive inflation out there and the high interest rates. So we have a competitive product that's becoming popular right now, and I think it's a great time to share it. So thanks everybody for coming, and we will see you next week.